And not the most common type, but probably the type that most often we think about when we hear the word seizure or epilepsy. And it's probably also one of the scariest because we know there's that complete loss of consciousness and complete loss of awareness. And it usually starts with kind of some sort of guttural sound just because all the air is being pushed out of the diaphragm. And then they're going to go into the tonic phase, which is where their muscles get really, really tight. And that'll last maybe 15, 20 seconds. And then they'll go into the clonic phase, which is the convulsions and the shaking portion, which will last the duration of the seizure. The other thing with this is that there might be some more things that happen during the seizure that seem really life-threatening. They might have really erratic breathing or non-existent breathing. They might have loss of their bladder or bowel. They might vomit. Might have a lot of excess saliva because they don't have that muscle control to be able to swallow. They also might have bluing around their lips or maybe some of their extremities. And the thing is this is just a part of the seizure. This is what the brain is telling the body to do during the seizure. And as the seizure starts to end, a lot of these things will also end. The breathing will come back. The color of the skin will start to come back. So really we say there's no need to provide care at that moment for breathing or for any of that other stuff. Wait until the seizure is done and then provide necessary care if needed to. So response is also different for every type, as you can imagine, because the seizures look different, and some of them do have that complete loss of consciousness, some of them don't. Some of them have loss of muscle tone, some of them don't. So the response is different for everyone. So we're going to kind of go over the most common ones and how to respond best. So the big thing with the complex partial seizure, with the simple partial seizure and the absence seizure, because they're so brief, really all that a witness or bystander can do is just reassure the person and kind of just make sure that they're safe, nothing that you can do to help, kind of make sure they're oriented back into their situation and make sure that they're okay. Both of those don't tend to have a kind of recovery period, not like the complex partial and the tonic-clonic. So with the complex partial, the big thing, and this is, again, really true for all of the seizure types, is that people want to stay calm and you want to not restrain them. I think it's sometimes our natural tendency that we want to take control of a situation, so we want to sit them down or we want to get them over into a corner, but it's really unsafe for them because they don't know your intentions necessarily. They don't know that you're trying to help them, and so it's best to just keep the area as safe as you can around them. If you do need to guide, you can do it from behind and make sure they're not, going to trip over a cord or trip on some stairs, but really your job is just to make sure that the individual is safe, and sometimes having to explain to other people around too. If it's a person that you don't know and you're not sure what's going on, sometimes that's where the epilepsy or the ID bracelets can come in handy. If you see that and know, you can maybe quickly be able to assess and kind of respond. Otherwise, really just that staying calm and saying whatever the next steps are, whether you're calling 911 or whatever kind of the policies are. For the tonic-clonic seizure, the big things, I always think about the three biggest takeaways or things that I'm trying to remember with the tonic-clonic. And the number one thing is we're trying to keep their airway open. And the best way to really do that with an individual is to turn them on their side. And it is essentially the first aid recovery position. So we're getting them onto their side to make sure we're keeping that airway as open and clear as we can. And next you want to try and put something soft underneath their head. We just don't want to cause any more damage to the brain or the head. And so it could be, if you have something around, a sweater, great. If not, you can just use your hands too. When a person has a seizure, one, they don't know that they're having a seizure. They don't know really what's going on. And two, they're usually dead weight. So I sometimes find it helpful that I can get them on the side and maybe I'm down kind of on my knees, making sure they're staying on their side and using my hand underneath their head just to kind of give that little barrier between their head and the ground. The third thing is that you don't want to put anything in their mouth. This used to be best practice about 25 years ago. We even used to have little tongue depressors and little things, and we know that that was thought to be the best thing, but they have found that that causes more harm. So no need to put anything in their mouth. Don't need to give them an extra dose of their medication. You don't need to put a spoon or wallet. You're really just thinking about keeping that airway open by turning them on their side and protecting their head. There are some other things too that you want to make sure you're trying to time the seizure, and this can be tough if you're the one actually providing care. So sometimes this might be something that you want to delegate off. Otherwise, even if you can just kind of check your watch quick, check a phone, so that you have some idea of how long the seizure lasted. Because whether this is a first-time seizure or their 100th seizure, that's a really big piece of that documentation, is knowing how long did the seizure last. It really is helpful for the physicians as they're treating them and trying to figure out kind of what's going on, because that length can help them figure out if meds are working or kind of other things are working or not. The other thing I want to talk about is the post-ictal state. So this was kind of the recovery period that I alluded to earlier. And so post-ictal just means after the seizure. And so this is the part where the seizure's over, you're not timing anymore, but it may be something where they are just not back to 100%. They haven't quite hit their baseline yet, and they might still be a little disoriented. And we find that for some people, it lasts just a couple of minutes. Other people might need a full day. And we know that this can be a little confusing because we've heard stories of people where sometimes they maybe have gone to the hospital, or they were in public, and they can answer their name and what year it is, but maybe they don't remember their address, or they don't remember their phone number. And so you really want to make sure that they're back to that 100%, and that they really are able to kind of move on with their next activity, or before you're kind of sending them alone to get home, or things like that. So number 5, halfway through, there are important things to know, is that most seizures aren't medical emergencies. Most of the time, care can be provided on site, and an ambulance or medical intervention doesn't need to happen. Kind of our idea, or kind of our thoughts that we think are best to help when seizures can be considered an emergency. And again, these are just general. So I always think when you're working with an individual that you know has epilepsy and seizures, or you have a friend or family member, it's great to ask them specifically when their seizures are considered an emergency. These are just some of the more common ones. So if it's a first-time seizure, because it may be someone that you have no clue about their medical background, if they're further injured or have diabetes, or they're pregnant, or some other medical condition that might need attention, if that normal breathing doesn't come back, or if they are injured more or had something that now you need to kind of provide further care for. The other one is if they have a seizure in water. So there can just be a lot of complications if a seizure happens in water. So we say it's always best to just have them either transported, or a call into their doctor, so that they can kind of make sure that everything kind of comes out good and well. So number 6 is that epilepsy, for the majority of the cases, so about 70% of the time, is controlled by medication or sometimes some other treatment options. So a lot of people living with epilepsy are able to get good control through medicine or another treatment option. So medication's usually the first line. It's usually the first thing people are going to go to, least invasive. We're really fortunate to have more medicines out there. In the early 90s, we really used to only have about 5 meds. Now we're up to a little bit over 30, so a lot more options for people. As they've come out with more, they're getting cleaner too, kind of less side effects, and just more options for people. The big thing with medication is that they're always trying to find that balance of quality of life and seizure control. These are really strong meds, and they're usually on pretty high doses. And so they might have these side effects that they're dealing with every single day. So you maybe could never see a person have a seizure, but you could be dealing with their side effects every day. And that could be something that maybe they just get tired a lot easier. They have concentration or attention issues. It also might be that sometimes they have behavior changes, and other times it can be that they have memory issues. So we know when we are working with individuals, when we're talking either in schools or employment, is to sometimes make sure that those side effects are brought up in any of their action plans or any of their stuff, because that could be the things that affect kind of their daily regimen and the things that they are doing. Not everybody gets side effects. A lot of times they will go away. It can take a while, 6 to 8 weeks, to sometimes titrate or get up to the right dose of a medication. So it could take a little while for the side effects to go away too. Some people, they're always going to have them. So the seventh thing is that there's other treatment options too besides medicine. They kind of course, like I said, that's usually the first line they're going to go to, but that doesn't always mean if that doesn't work that was their only option. There are other options out there that people can try and use, which is really great because it's giving a lot more hope for people to try some other things too. So we're going to go over kind of some of those other treatment options, surgery, devices, diet, and some of the newer therapies that have come out. So with surgery, the thing, this can be obviously really great for some people. Some people are not candidates. At this time, we don't know how to be able to remove the whole brain. So it's really more for people that have those partial seizures, that they can just remove the hot spot or the area where that seizure activity is happening. Other times, they may have the corpus callosotomy, and this one is where they are splitting that's kind of the vein, the area that splits the hemisphere, so sometimes they're splitting that. And then there's a newer one, the Visualase, which is MRI guided laser ablation, and so this is more for like tumors or tubers, so it's kind of for that specific type thing. The big thing with surgery is that even to be a surgical candidate is a pretty big process. A lot of testing, a lot of kind of even pre-surgeries where they have to go in and put a grid on the skull to figure out where things are happening. So it's definitely not a decision that's gone into lightly, but it can be a really great option for some people. They can sometimes be seizure-free. Other people can reduce their seizure types very drastically. The other option is that there are some devices out there. So these are a little less invasive. The VNS is one, or the vagal nerve stimulator. So you can see by the photo that it's just kind of a little generator. It's really about this big, so it's pretty small. It goes right into the left side of the chest, wraps up around the vagus nerve, and then it is set by the physician to go off at certain intervals. And the thought is that what it will do is that it will kind of stop that seizure or that misfiring from happening. So that's kind of, its efficacy gets better the longer a person has it. So because they're able to kind of be able to figure out the right timing of when it can go off. And the other thing with the VNS is that it has a magnet that it can also work with. It literally looks like an Apple Watch, and what you can do is if a seizure starts and the VNS hasn't gone off, it can be run over the outside of the generator to stimulate it to go off, and that can either be done by the individual themselves or by a person around them. The next kind of device is the RNS. This is a kind of a newer device that has been out there, a little bit more invasive because they do open up the skull and put a little basket in there to put the generator in, and then the generator can have up to 6 leads, and these leads will kind of go to the hot spots or the area of where that misfiring is happening. It's also kind of hoping to possibly be able to detect when maybe that misfiring is going to happen so that it can go off. Otherwise, it kind of does have that preset thing to trying to figure out when to go off and kind of when to help with that. The other device is the Aspire. So this is made by the same company that makes the VNS, and sometimes it looks just like it, kind of has the same capabilities. And the thing with the Aspire is that it can detect what it's looking at is it's looking at the heart rate. So they're looking at that correlation of that there's a high heart rate when a seizure happens. So then it's maybe going to say when this individual hits this certain heart rate, we're going to have it stimulate and go off. So again, just great to see these newer technologies kind of coming out. Obviously, they're not 100% perfect, but it's great to see them coming out and people using them and being able to kind of help as we treat all the different forms of epilepsy. There also can be some diets out there, and some of the diets are just used with in conjunction with a medication, and some are a little bit more loose, like the modified Atkins or the low glycemic. And then there's the ketogenic diet, which, as you can kind of see by the pie chart, is it's definitely a very strict diet, and it's mostly fats, which you would think normally, oh great, I can totally do that. But the fats have to be a certain kind of fat, and it's always got to be, they work very closely with a nutritionist and dietitian to make sure that they're getting the right amounts of stuff. We've seen kids that sometimes just drink little creamer cups or eat slabs of butter to make sure that they're getting enough of the fat that they need in each meal. So it's definitely not a free-for-all where you can just eat cupcakes and pizza all the time. And there's no cheating on it either, because once the brain gets into ketosis, any little change, so if there's an extra nut or they had too much of the kind of fat, they could get out of ketosis. And they're not sure why it works, but for some people, again, it's just been a game changer for them. They've tried lots of other things. They try the ketogenic diet and they become seizure-free, or again, their seizures are drastically reduced. So it's just another great option that is out there. So number 8 is that even though epilepsy is a medical condition, it's still the whole person needs to be treated. So we need to look at the other things outside of just the seizures, because sometimes there can be high correlations with other people. And so kind of some of the stats that I have up here is that about 50 to 60% of people with epilepsy also have other mood disorders, with kind of the higher ones being depression and anxiety. We also know that there can be a big correlation with other ADD, ADHD. Sometimes we hear about correlation with other kind of mental health conditions also. And so we just want to make sure that the individual is getting the best care. And so when we talk to individuals and families about kind of their epilepsy and their seizures, is that we want to make sure that they know, make sure you're getting that comprehensive care. You're getting that medical part taken care of, but that you're also looking to see, are there kind of some other mental health things that maybe could be looked at to help every day and work through different things. And number 9 is epilepsy can be more than just seizures. And this is kind of even going off a little bit of number 8, is that epilepsy is just a condition that some people have, and it doesn't make them their whole person, and it sometimes isn't just the seizures. There are lots of other implications and things that go into day-to-day life that sometimes we take for granted that we don't have to think about. So some of those things could be financial constraints. So when we think about medication and how expensive that is, going to the doctor all the time, getting that care, if there's any kind of emergency room visits, we know that statistically people with epilepsy do have more emergency room visits. So there can be lots of those other financial constraints that come along with a chronic condition. Also working through any of their personal and work relationships. So a lot of this comes kind of with with the point of disclosing. Some people aren't comfortable telling other people because they're not sure how they're going to react or what they're going to say, or kind of, are they going to still be my friend? Are they still going to want to date me? So there can be a lot of those issues that come up with it also. And driving and transportation, this is a huge one. In Minnesota, the driving rule is that you need to be seizure-free for 3 months to obtain a driver's license. And if you have a seizure, and really the rule reads loss of consciousness. So if you have a loss of consciousness seizure, it is a self-reporting state. So you would call the DMV or DVR and kind of let them know. And then your physician would have to sign off that you've been seizure-free for 3 months before you can get your license back. So some people are never going to get their license because they're having kind of seizures maybe frequently enough. So they have to rely on public transportation, which if you live kind of right in the city is pretty good. But the further you get out, the more challenging it can be and the more costly it can be also. So we know that it's a really big issue for people, is being able to get to different things, even just as simple as getting to work every day, especially depending on where they live. Gets costly to take a cab, or maybe in our weather we can't always bike everywhere. And the other thing is that sometimes there could be learning and school performance. Not always, but again, there could be issues where maybe there are just, where people need a few accommodations, or they need just a few things to kind of make sure that their learning and their school performance are up to par of what they're capable of. So number 10, kind of my last thing, is that there are tons of resources out there to help. There are lots of ways for individuals and families to get kind of the best care and the best information and education out there. Next slide. So a couple that we have, and I'll talk about some of the other community organizations too. We do have an app that's called Seizure First Aid. So note it has an E. And what's really great about this app that we use it a lot for is as soon as you open it, the timer starts. So if you are working with people or you're around someone who has seizures frequently, that can be really helpful in the timing. There are some seizure clips and a little bit of seizure information too. So sometimes if people just are wondering and you want quick information, our app is accurate and helpful. That's the other thing. If you are looking for, today I didn't have any kind of clips or visuals of the different seizure types, but on our website we do have a video, and on our YouTube site we have other videos too of great visuals of the different kind of seizures. So you can just go on that, be able to view it, get a better idea if you're kind of curious what the different seizure types look like. This has all of our contact information. The other thing is that what is really great about our organization and kind of being in this state also and in this area is that there's a lot of great resources. So if us at the Epilepsy Foundation can help with a certain thing, then we're going to refer out to another organization that can help with that. There are so many fantastic organizations to help with everything from transportation to medications to kind of scholarships, different things that people may need the help with. And sometimes we're their first stop, is that they're going to give us a call or email us, and if we can't help them with the information, we can give them the other resources to help with some of that. So it's really great to see that community and connection that we have around the state, because I think Minnesota offers so many fantastic organizations that work really well together. That's kind of it for my presentation of like the top 10 things to know. Does anybody have questions? Yeah. Sure. 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 Yeah. So his question was asking about, does epilepsy, because a lot of people with epilepsy cannot drive, but it's not always considered a disability. Do they qualify for under the disability for Metro Transit? And I'm gonna look to Nikki. I think they do. Yeah, I actually think they do. Epilepsy does qualify, and so they do get the disability and they do get the free transportation. So yeah, so Metro Transit also has a service called Metro Mobility, and that service is, it does come at a cost because it's personalized. It comes right to your house and takes you right where you need to go, and kind of how that can work. I'm not exactly sure on the pay scales of kind of how it works, but they also do have the same day service. But as far as just qualifying to take the transit every day, they do get that component. Is that right, Nick? So my coworker also just mentioned that epilepsy is recognized as a disability by the state of Minnesota as well as by the Department of Education, so that there are services that are available that would qualify under the disability services. It kind of depends on the county, and that it's definitely individualized. So make sure you can definitely start with us, give us a call, and we can kind of get you to the right resources. Any other questions? No, go ahead. That's all right. So his question was about responding to a person who is pregnant if they have a seizure. And so kind of just like when we talked about under the medical emergency portion, that would be something where you would call 911. It does kind of qualify under that unless you're super familiar with the individual and they have a different plan. If it's someone you're not familiar with or just merely an acquaintance, you would call 911. Just to have that looked at. People that have epilepsy can get pregnant. They just work with their neurologist and an OBGYN and can work to kind of find the right medications to stay on to keep them healthy as well as the baby. So there can be there's a lot of successful and very kind of easier ways for women with epilepsy to also be able to get pregnant. The other thing, too, is that, so we'll have our breakout sessions after this, and then we do have the tables around, and feel free, there's quite a few of us staff around, so feel free to ask people questions if other things come up, or you're just curious about stuff. We're happy to kind of help with any of that, too. So with that, I hope you guys took away kind of something new, and we'll kind of move into a little bit of, I think we'll have a little bit of networking time, and then go into our breakout sessions. Thank you.